It is a great pleasure to address you today. The global estimates on child labor, which were released only a few weeks ago, have revealed an alarming new trend. For the first time in 2 decades, we have seen an increase in child labor. 8.4 million more children are engaged in this practice today, bringing the total number of children in child labor to 160 million globally. That is 1 in 10 children worldwide. The COVID-19 pandemic has further increased uncertainties for children and their families. Job losses and sharp declines in household income are hitting already vulnerable families, putting pressure on children to contribute. As a result, an additional 9 million children are at risk of being pushed into child labor by the end of 2022 because of the pandemic. The trajectory that these trends will take over the next years depends on the policy choices we make today. For its part, Luxembourg has made the protection and promotion of the rights of the child a key priority of our candidacy to the Human Rights Council for the 2022-2024 term. In order to protect children's rights and reverse the rise in child labor at a global scale, we must work together across generations, across sectors, and across countries. That is why in April of this year, the group of friends of children and the SDGs, which Luxembourg has the pleasure to co-chairing, together with Jamaica and Bulgaria, held a first of its kind joint meeting with the group of Friends of Decent Work, co-chaired by Morocco and Belgium. As a direct outcome of this meeting, 92 members of both groups of friends came together to agree on 3 courses of action that the international community as a whole should pursue as a priority. First, on education. We need to invest more in education and reimagine better systems, curricula and skills building to set children up for success, including in decent jobs that will be available to them when they transition to the workforce. While online education is not a substitute for in-person learning, every child should have digital connectivity and safe access to the internet. Second, on social protection for the most vulnerable children and full and productive employment and decent work for their families. It is imperative that resources deployed as part of the COVID-19 response and recovery are committed towards protecting children's rights and well-being by ensuring adequate, efficient, and effective social spending. Additionally, we must prevent and combat all forms of violence, including domestic violence and abuse, sexual exploitation of children online and offline, and cyberbullying, while also bridging the digital divide through safe access to the internet for all. Third, children and youth must be fully engaged in creating a safe, a fair, an inclusive and sustainable recovery through mechanisms that enable meaningful child and youth participation at local, national, regional and global levels. It is crucial that we continue to engage with children and youth as stakeholders, solution creators and agents of change in the context of the high-level political forum and the 2030 agenda as a whole, including through improved mechanisms and opportunities at the United Nations. 2021 and 2022 will be crucial years for global efforts to eliminate child labor and for protecting and promoting the rights of every child, everywhere, It is by working together that we can make a difference for children. I thank you.
Thank you to Minister Asselborn for his opening remarks and for highlighting the importance of investing in education and access to internet, ensuring social protection for vulnerable families, and engaging children and youth for the creation of safe and inclusive recovery mechanisms. It is a pleasure to have here with us many leaders who have dedicated great efforts to the fight against forced labor, modern slavery, human trafficking, and child labor. An example are Pathfinder countries of Alliance 8.7. These countries are driving change and showing a strong commitment to SDG Target 8.7. 4 years after the launch of the Pathfinder country strategy, 26 countries have expressed their interest to be a Pathfinder country, and they have rapidly moved from commitment to implementation. Today, we are here to congratulate Pathfinder countries that, despite the crisis, have reported significant progress, such as creating intersectoral coordination mechanisms, producing knowledge to inform policy, establishing international cooperation agreements, strengthening their legal frameworks, and raising awareness on these human rights violations. It is therefore my pleasure to officially launch the 2021 Progress e-reports of Alliance 8.7. Pathfinder countries. These e-reports are available on the Alliance 8.7 website, and I'm pleased to invite you to watch this video. Here you are. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the speakers of the first part of the panel discussion. We have the pleasure to have with us 3 Pathfinder countries leaders, Ms. Silvia Lara Povedano, Minister of Labor and Social Security of Costa Rica, Ms. Vera Kamtukule, Deputy Minister of Labor of Malawi, and Mr. Roel Gans, Director of International Affairs at the Ministry of Social Affairs and Employment of the Netherlands. It is a great pleasure to have you with us. You've shown a long-standing commitment to the elimination of child labor and forced labor. Your countries have ratified all 8 of the fundamental ILO conventions, became Alliance 8.7 Pathfinder countries, and shown significant progress. Recently, your countries have also made an action pledge for the International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. In this context, I'll ask the same question to the 3 of you. What does it mean for your countries to be a Pathfinder country? And what steps are your governments taking to put international commitment into practice, particularly in the framework of the Pathfinder country process? We will start with you, Minister Povedano. The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches para algunos de ustedes. Reciban del gobierno de Costa Rica un muy afectuoso saludo para usted, señora moderadora, para los colegas del panel y para todas las personas que nos acompañan hoy. Costa Rica, país pionero de la Alianza 8.7, aspira y se ha comprometido a ser un país libre de trabajo infantil en el año 2025. Y estamos trabajando con esa meta como el objetivo que guía todas nuestras acciones y nuestras decisiones. Y estamos cerca. En el año 2020, la tasa de ocupación de personas menores de edad, la tasa de trabajo infantil, fue de 1.4%. Incluso se dice que estamos en el margen de error. Decimos también que estamos en la recta final al año 2025. Sí es importante tener presente que estamos también pendientes de los datos que surgirán pronto, con lo que podremos determinar el impacto de la pandemia en el trabajo infantil. Y estamos esperando el impacto, determinar cuál es el impacto. Pero ciertamente nos sentimos y actuamos como si estuviéramos en esa recta final. Como parte de la Alianza 8.7 y país pionero, nos comprometimos y propusimos acelerar los esfuerzos y los resultados con 2 líneas de trabajo prioritarias. Una, probar nuevos enfoques. Y 2, colaborar con otros a través de las alianzas. En relación con el primer punto, de probar nuevos enfoques, estamos trabajando yo diría, con 3 nuevos enfoques. Un enfoque que prioriza intervenciones que llamamos intervenciones de precisión, de acupuntura. Ya no es suficiente realizar intervenciones en general. Requerimos intervenciones de precisión porque para erradicar el trabajo infantil requerimos acciones muy precisas que ponen el foco donde más se necesita. Ese es uno. El otro enfoque que estamos priorizando en nuestras intervenciones es un fuerte enfoque local. Está bien las políticas y las intervenciones en el nivel nacional, pero no hay duda que esta recta final requiere de una intervención mucho más local. Y 3, muy importante, estamos avanzando no solo en la identificación de situaciones de trabajo infantil actual, sino de situaciones y condiciones de riesgo de trabajo infantil. El objetivo no es solo lograr la meta en el 2025, sino mantener la meta. Y por ello estamos ya desarrollando mecanismos de gestión de riesgos de trabajo infantil como una estrategia de prevención. Una herramienta clave para implementar estos 3 enfoques, el de precisión, el del enfoque local y el de gestión de riesgos, ha sido el desarrollo del sistema de indicadores de riesgo de trabajo infantil desarrollado por la CEPAL. Corrimos los indicadores de este sistema de indicadores de gestión de riesgo para todos los cantones del país. Los cantones en nuestro país son la unidad territorial más local que cuenta con un gobierno local. Cada gobierno local tiene hoy día claridad sobre a dónde están los riesgos para actuar preventivamente. El sistema de indicadores también permitió identificar territorios, cantones, donde es más alta la tasa de trabajo infantil y sobre todo nos permitió identificar con mucha precisión a dónde en los territorios están los mayores riesgos. Y con base en esa información muy precisa se han desarrollado planes de acción precisos según las características de los lugares identificados. Es importante subrayar que además existe en nuestro país legislación que da un mandato a los gobiernos locales para realizar este tipo de diagnósticos y desarrollar planes de intervención. Además de probar estos nuevos enfoques, se ha puesto énfasis en otra línea de trabajo, la de la colaboración con otros actores y las alianzas. Y aquí quisiera remarcar 2 alianzas que han sido muy decisivas en avanzar los logros, los resultados. En el año 2015 se creó la Red de Empresas contra el Trabajo Infantil. Se trata de un conjunto de empresas comprometidas con una operación de negocios responsable con la sociedad y que pone un foco en la erradicación del trabajo infantil en todos los aspectos de la operación de las empresas. Entre el grupo de empresas que hacen parte de la red hay muchas empresas del sector agropecuario. Estas empresas, además, en conjunto con la cooperación de la Unión Europea y la OIT, y con estas empresas desarrollamos, y esto es muy importante, una guía de conducta empresarial responsable y debida diligencia para identificar en la operación de las empresas situaciones o riesgos de trabajo infantil con un fuerte énfasis en las cadenas de valor. Y ha sido muy, muy útil el compromiso fuerte y decidido del sector empresarial. También me interesa mucho subrayar el trabajo que hemos venido coordinando con organizaciones sindicales, principalmente las organizaciones sindicales del sector educativo. Y el trabajo ha consistido en realizar autodiagnósticos por parte de las organizaciones sindicales para determinar hasta qué punto estas organizaciones sindicales están preparadas, por ejemplo, para detectar situaciones de trabajo infantil en las aulas del sistema educativo. Como país pionero, comprometido con la Alianza 8.7, en este desafío que estamos llamando la recta final al 2025, estos nuevos enfoques de trabajo preciso, local, preventivo, y el enfoque de colaboración y alianzas han sido un factor de éxito, sin duda, para acelerar los resultados. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Minister. It was very, very important to hear from you about bringing accuracy and precision to your actions, putting the emphasis on local diagnosis and solutions. We were very interested by your guidebook for companies. Hopefully you can share it with all other countries, Pathfinders and others, because it would be very helpful. And this idea of collaborative awareness with trade unions and more generally, in coalitions, this is very, very important for all of us to hear from it. May I now ask to Ms. Vera Kamtukule? Are you still there? I don't see you on the screen.
Here. Okay.
Could you put your video on?
Can you see
yes,
me now?
Great, great. That's great.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy and very proud to be part of this debate. And I'm pleased to report that for Malawi, being a Pathfinder country means that we are a model in taking action aimed at achieving the targets 8.7. What this means is that we have already submitted our action pledge for the 2021 UN International Year for the Elimination of Child Labor. Our action pledge is adopt and launch the National Child Labor Advocacy and Communication Strategy and build media and stakeholder capacity for implementation, because we know that as a government, it's very difficult for us to do everything that we are expected to do. We'll still need to have a powerful and more strategic communication approach to ensure that we are building that capacity on the ground. Just to explain a little bit more on why we have settled for this choice, over half of child labor cases in Malawi involve family work. And this is because traditionally children have worked alongside other members of their family. So it's a cultural thing as far as Malawi is concerned. But usually what happens is that it becomes a little bit difficult and challenging to draw the line, to say, where do you draw the line between you bringing up a child to be a responsible adult, but also where do you draw the line with that now being a form of child labor? There is a lack of understanding on where child labor becomes work, which is acceptable and beneficial to a child as part of learning various skills. And also where that work, the work that the child has to do now becomes hazardous to the child in the first place. I also wanted to mention that our social partners too have submitted their pledges, and as government, we ensure that there is close collaboration in the implementation of these 3 pledges for maximum impact. We have all the necessary supporting legal and policy instruments in place to accelerate action towards the achievement of SDG 8.7 in Malawi. Just to mention a few, we have the Employment Act and the subsidiary legislation, the list of hazardous work for children, the Malawi Decent Work Program 2020 to 2023, the National Action Plan on Child Labor 2020 to 2025, and the National Child Labor Mainstreaming Guide. But in order for us to continuously improve our frameworks, Malawi Parliament a week ago passed for abolishing the tenancy labor, which is a practice of growing tobacco whereby workers, known as tenants, are paid at the end of the growing season once the tobacco has been sold. This system exposed the tenants to manipulation by the employer or the landlord, as a result of which tenants live in conditions of extreme poverty and then end up transferring the same to their children. And also, this was providing a rich breeding ground for forced labor as well as child labor. There are a number of initiatives being implemented in Malawi at the moment through our ministry and others through other government ministries and organizations that directly contribute to the achievement of SDG 8.7. I'll just mention a few of them. Number 1, education. The ongoing construction of 250 new secondary schools and 103 classroom blocks in existing secondary schools to increase intake. Presently, only 38% of children completing primary education are absorbed into secondary education, which is one of the low rates, I think, in Africa. This condition is there because we have limited space as well as limited teachers and infrastructure in the education sector, hence the need for the agent expansion. The second thing is on early and forced marriages. This is one of the challenges that we are facing as a nation. It's across the country, but in some, it's more pronounced in other districts, like along those that are along the lake, for example. So there are a number of initiatives and alliances focusing on ending child and forced marriages. They include More Than Brides Alliance, Girls Not Brides Alliance, and the Spotlight Initiative on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls program. Through such efforts, a lot of girls are being rescued and messages on addressing the problem disseminated. We will need more partners and players, and we would gladly welcome those who may wish to join us. The third thing is in partnerships. Major tobacco companies have partnered government in the elimination of child labor and forced labor in tobacco growing, with a focus on labor inspections, because we know that if we don't build our capacity as a media and as partners on inspections, it is smoke out practices of child labor and also on forced labor. To this end, we have concluded memorandums of understanding with the companies. Those are in the private sector, in the tobacco sector. These public-private partnerships have also proved very helpful, and we are exploring how we can extend the same to other sectors. The fourth one is on social protection. Largely due to the impact of COVID-19, government has increased the coverage of social protection, and in particular, we have extended coverage to urban areas in order to include low-earning citizens who have lost their jobs or that are doing small-scale businesses. This will help to prevent children from such families from falling into child labor or indeed sexual exploitation. Finally, I should give credit to the National Child Labor Technical Working Group for tirelessly working on the development of strategies aimed at promoting the achievement of Target 8.7, including the National Plan on Child Labor and the National Child Labor Mainstreaming. That would be all from our end from the Malawi government on child labor issues, and I thank you so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tukule. It was very interesting to hear about the cultural root causes you put forward in the context of family, family working, the family framework for child labor, but also the very important issue of forced and child marriages, that we should address also child labor to make sure that children go to school and have all their rights respected. It was very interesting to hear also from your sectoral approach to tobacco and the fact that you have launched partnerships with the private sector and also inspections in this realm. And of course, the question of education infrastructures with building schools and social protection, which are the main solutions to address root causes of child labor. May I now give the floor to our colleague Roel Gans from the Netherlands, a new Pathfinder country since a few months ago. Welcome to you, to your country, Roel. Would you mind please give us the same, the same questions, the same answers? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anousheh, for giving me the floor. And let me state right at the outset that it is an honor and a pleasure for me to have become part of this group. Indeed, the Netherlands became a Pathfinder country quite recently, in April. And before I tell and share a little bit more about that, let me first of all express my support for the joint statement made by the two groups of friends. This statement is more important than ever, especially because the number of children in labor is on the rise. In building back better, we need a resilient, fair, sustainable, and inclusive approach that mitigates the impacts caused by the lockdown measures and global closures, with particular attention to our children and future generations. Secondly, I want to congratulate my fellow older Pathfinder countries with their progress reports. Effective monitoring and analysis of impact and progress in the fight against child labor is one of the priorities of the Netherlands as a Pathfinder country, and we attach great value to an effective monitoring system so that we all keep a close eye on measuring progress in future. We need to repeatedly ask ourselves how we ensure that we keep on holding each other accountable for achieving the necessary progress to ultimately eradicate child labor completely from this world. The Netherlands, even though we are a recent member as a Pathfinder country, has a long history in combating child labor. Some of the older people in the audience might recall that in 2010, the Netherlands hosted the second global conference on the elimination of child labor in The Hague. And they might also recall that at that time, we concluded the conference unanimously with the conclusion that we should try and eradicate the worst forms of child labor by 2016. Now, obviously, that was a too optimistic goal. We did not achieve it, but it does illustrate why we think that monitoring is very important to stimulate progress in achieving the ultimate goal of the elimination of all forms of child labor. We believe very strongly that we need to cooperate further together at a national and international level, and that is why we decided to join Alliance 8.7 as a Pathfinder country. And we want to give shape to our belief in the following way. The Netherlands has three priorities in the framework of Alliance 8.7. The first is that we want to encourage businesses, enterprises to tackle child labor and labor exploitation in their global supply chains. We believe that companies hold a very important key to the eradication of child labor. And a lot of these companies operating in global supply chains are Western companies, and they have a huge responsibility to eradicate child labor. Secondly, we want to promote dialogue on SDG 8.7, both at the national level and at the international level. And thirdly, and then I come back to the theme of monitoring, we want to ensure effective monitoring and analysis of the impact and progress we achieve on the road to completely eliminate child labor. And that, I think, rounds it off for my first intervention. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roel, for all the insights you gave us and your three priorities. One cross-cutting question between Costa Rica and the Netherlands is the way we can increase awareness of our companies all over the world about the global supply chains, but also, as we know that we have a specific question with agricultural sector, also in domestic supply chains, both of them. But I think it's very important to learn from each other how we can raise awareness of our companies about this very specific issue. It is very inspiring to hear your views, the three of you, on how can international commitment translate into concrete measures and actions to eliminate child labor. The new global estimates gives a clear message. Although there has been significant progress in the fight against child labor, it is clear that we must do better and faster, maintaining and increasing public spending to tackle the root causes of child labor, as Vera said, about school programming, school building, but also social protection are very important in the context of reduced fiscal space caused by the pandemic. We should be aware of that. But renewed cooperation and support for countries most affected by child labor is urgently needed to honor our commitments. Again, same question to the three of you. What financing strategies are you already putting into place? Or do you think that have to be put into place to achieve SDG target 8.7? And what is your role as a Pathfinder country in this regard? Minister Povedano.
Gracias, gracias. Muy inspirador escuchar a los compañeros del panel en relación con esas acciones concretas que están desarrollando. En relación con el financiamiento, yo quisiera puntualizar tres cosas. Uno, que, a ver, Costa Rica ha destinado recursos para contar con equipos de trabajo en las instituciones que se dedican tiempo completo al desafío de la erradicación del trabajo infantil. Por ejemplo, en el Ministerio de Trabajo tenemos un equipo de personas dedicadas exclusivamente a ese propósito. Con esto lo que quiero decir es que el compromiso de la erradicación del trabajo infantil no es una meta periférica, no es una meta marginal que se atiende cuando hay dinero o cuando hay tiempo. Todo lo contrario, ¿verdad? Hay una definición de política clara que se ha traducido en la creación de espacios institucionales con personas dedicadas a ello y, por supuesto, con toda la legislación que se requiere. No voy a repetir ni repasar la legislación, es más o menos la que conocemos internacionalmente. Entonces, eso es lo primero que quisiera señalar, que no es posible abordar este desafío con una visión marginal y periférica de las acciones y las intervenciones de los estados. Dos, Costa Rica es un país que en los últimos 50, 60 años ha dedicado un gran esfuerzo a la inversión social. En el año 48, Costa Rica abolió su ejército y hemos dedicado todos esos recursos que en otros casos se dedican a los ejércitos a la inversión social. Tenemos entonces, y aquí quisiera puntualizar, una gran inversión en educación. Y en relación con lo que tiene que ver con trabajo infantil, quisiera señalar, tenemos un programa de becas escolares muy, muy fuerte. Tenemos un programa de comedores escolares, es decir, todos los niños y las niñas en nuestro país tienen derecho a una comida servida al día y a veces más, todos los días. Y ese es un factor muy importante de retención. En muchos casos los niños asisten a los centros educativos porque hay comida servida. Y tres, muy importante, además, hay transporte escolar gratuito para nuestros estudiantes. Entonces, desde el punto de vista del sistema educativo, hemos creado una serie de condiciones para la retención de los niños y las niñas y adolescentes en el sistema educativo. Pero hemos encontrado, y por eso me interesa esta conversación sobre pioneros, que aún con esas condiciones no es suficiente. Y entonces en los centros educativos se han creado lo que hemos denominado comités de permanencia. Son task force, grupos de trabajo que están identificando otras razones por las cuales los niños y las niñas abandonan las aulas. Y estos son task force que visitan a los niños y las niñas en sus casas para identificar cuál es el mecanismo para lograr su permanencia, su regreso, su retención en las aulas. Pero quizá en el tercero elemento es en el más que me quisiera concentrar, y es que hemos ideado un subsidio que se entrega a las familias cuyos niños o niñas estaban en trabajo infantil. Se entrega un subsidio a las familias condicionado a que los niños vuelvan a las aulas. Y ese subsidio se entrega a la familia durante todo el periodo de educación primaria y secundaria de estos niños, niñas y adolescentes. Y este factor, el hecho de que las familias, los hogares puedan contar con un ingreso, ha sido fundamental para lograr que esos hogares, que esas familias le apuesten al regreso de los niños a las aulas, o que le apuesten a que esos niños y niñas se dediquen al estudio, a la recreación, a la cultura, a ser niños. Estos tres factores, pero principalmente quisiera subrayar estos dos: el subsidio que se entrega a los hogares, y dos, estos comités de permanencia en cada centro educativo que está abordando otros elementos más bien de tipo cultural, psicosocial, que no siempre se resuelven con becas o con transferencias monetarias, han sido claves.
Thank you very much, Minister. It is always very inspiring to hear from you. Human resources, concentration of all the efforts, mainstreaming, and also social investment. This is not a cost, but it is an investment to tackle child labor. May I now give the floor to Ms. Kantukule, por favor? Please. You should turn on your micro.
Sorry, I missed. Yes, I have. I missed the question.
It is about how you will finance the progress and what kind of resources you will mobilize to get into Target 8.7 and to the Pathfinder country process. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. The first strategy for us is to promote child labor mainstreaming, which is a cheaper way of bringing on board more players, because when we do mainstreaming, then the resources are already there. What you're doing is that through everyday work, you're able to also tackle issues of mainstreaming. So as we do our labor inspections, as we do the work that we're supposed to do as a ministry, we should encourage ourselves, even our partners, to mainstream child labor issues. And that's why we also developed the guide. The second way is to promote the public-private partnerships, because we have enough resources to tackle this overwhelming problem of child labor. but also it's we see it's a little more sustainable that way in eliminating child labor when we involve other players that are also within the sector, but also that should have say or something to do within in the elimination of child labor. What we're trying to do is to position child labor as a problem that would cut across all sectors of life in Malawi. So it doesn't matter whether you're not in tobacco growing, but as long as you're in Malawi and you're working within the economy, in whatever sector, whether you're in education, energy, or whatever it is, you should realize that problems that are coming in the country because of child labor will have adverse effects on your sector as well in the long run. So we are trying to ensure that we are promoting private public partnerships with government. The last thing for us would be the development of the National Action Plan on Child Labor as a tool to mobilize resources by urging stakeholders to adopt the actions that we have enshrined in the same. What we want to do is to provide, to have a plan, a sure plan that people can pick and say, I will support that element. Someone will say, I will support that element and all of that. What that would do will also make us look like we know where we want to go. We have a target that we want to reach, but we know that we don't have mechanisms or instruments to get there as far as resources are concerned. And so when we are partnering with other people, they will use that strategy or that plan to help us finance the programs that would be enshrined therein. Because sometimes you know that you have a problem, but if you don't have a plan in place, it becomes a little bit difficult to even convince other people to provide resources to assist you. So that's for us how we plan to finance this initiative. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kamtukule. Dear Raoul, can you also address the same question, please?
With pleasure, Anousheh. Like I mentioned in my previous small intervention, the Dutch approach in eliminating child labor primarily focuses on global supply chains. In doing so, we are working with multiple stakeholders because eliminating child labor can only be achieved with a joint effort. Companies, social partners, NGOs, and local authorities in production countries all need to work together and make use of various mutually reinforcing instruments. And let me illustrate what we are doing with 3 concrete examples. First of all, we work on capacity building for local authorities as the Netherlands. For that purpose, for example, we have created the so-called AXEL project. And through this project, we aim at improving the enabling environment to get rid of child labor. The project is fully funded by the government of the Netherlands. The budget for this project is more than 3 million euros over 5 years, 23 million euros over 5 years, excuse me. And the project is being implemented through the ILO. So the ILO administers the project, but the Netherlands pays for it. And the ILO has the knowledge at the local level to engage local authorities in this exercise of capacity building. Secondly, we have in the Netherlands created a special fund against child labor that supports projects that are initiated by Dutch companies who work internationally. Companies can receive a subsidy to a maximum of 70% of the total project costs from the Dutch government. And all the projects that we co-finance as a government all focus on either setting up dependable systems for due diligence or on eliminating child labor in their specific supply chains. The total budget for this fund each year is about 7 million euros, and we fund about, on average, about 12 concrete projects each year in this field. And to give you an example of the sort of concrete projects that we then finance, let me give you an example. We recently co-financed projects that were carried out by a company called Fairphone, that's a producer of smartphones, and co-financed projects by a group called the Arte Group that creates stone working surfaces for benches, etc. And both these companies are trying to create child-free labor zones. And they have been relatively successful in that, so that the products they take out of developing countries, that they are produced in a child-free environment. So those are two concrete projects in that sphere. And thirdly, what we do is we, let me see where I have that. Yeah, we support so-called area-based approaches through a program that we call Work No Child Business. And that program is a program that is being implemented by an alliance of NGOs in the Netherlands that consist of UNICEF Netherlands, the coalition Stop Child Labour, and Save the Children Netherlands. And all these three types of support instruments that we use, basically they have a number of things in common. Obviously, we are seeking for and searching for sustainable solutions for child labor. And we focus in all our work on issues like good governance. And of course, like all the previous speakers also said, in addressing the root causes of child labor. And therefore, we support partners and programs that contribute to, for example, access to quality education, and projects that try and bridge the gap between current wages and a truly adequate living wage and income. Because if family leaders or members don't have an adequate living wage or income, then they are quite often forced to send their children out to work. So there is a very strong reason to stimulate education of children, and to stimulate in that way that these children can also achieve quality jobs that give them a living wage, and therefore you break the vicious cycle of keeping children in child labor. I think that are the highlights I wanted to share with you right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roel. I think as we know that solutions are not always applicable from one national environment to the other, but all the very specific projects, all the three of you just mentioned, it is very interesting for us to share it together among Pathfinder countries, because we can learn from each other. And it is very important that we can mutualize all this information and share it together. As you can see, the power of the commitment of Pathfinder countries is enormous. It is an opportunity to boost political will and realize the vision we have been working towards for so many years. Alliance 8.7 is also this ideal platform because of its multi-stakeholder structure to scale up these solutions, that those that really work drive innovation and maximize the impact of resources. It is my pleasure now to invite two representatives of workers and employers organizations, Mr. Matthias Thorns, Deputy Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers, and Mr. Meashu Berihu Gebreyohans, Head of Department of Public Relations of the Confederation of Ethiopian Trade Unions. Hopefully we will have them very quickly on the screen. Great. You are very welcome to this panel. Please leave your video on during the whole panel, please. And for all those participants that are listening to us, we have a chat box if you want to ask any question, and we will try to answer to them as far as we go or further after our meeting. Thank you to both of you for being with us today. There is no doubt indeed that it is through social dialogue at all levels that we can design and implement right policies and measures while making sure that we maximize their impact on the ground. In this regard, I wish to thank once again the ITUC and the IOE and all their affiliate organizations for the continuous engagement in the work of the Alliance. I like to ask you a simple question. What is the role of workers and employers organizations at the national level to achieve target 8.7? And what are the opportunities in Pathfinder countries from workers and employers' points of view? Matthias, dear Matthias, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, it's your National Day today, so bonne fête, viva la France.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for having us here. We have discussed several times already the role of employers' federation for the eradication of child labor. And let us remind quickly what are the key rules of employers' federation. First of all, they're engaged in policy making, right? They're members of Economic and Social Council. They're engaging with the government, so they really can contribute to policies in the eradication of child labor. They are social partners, and you spoke about it, Anousheh. They engage in social dialogue, and together with trade union can engage in collective action to make sure we make progress. They are a bridge between companies and the public sector, also the UN, and they can organize these partnerships between the public sector and the private sector. And of course, they have a huge outreach to the private sector. They can engage with the SMEs, which is normally very hard to be reached, right? Because they are the members. They can raise awareness, they can build capacity there. Now, let me give you some practical examples what Employers Federation and Pathfinder countries are doing. In Honduras, in Guatemala, for instance, the Employers Federation in the sugarcane industry have developed extensive programs to improve access to education for children in rural areas. They're also helping companies in the identification of the age, right? To make age identification more easier for companies to ensure they are not hiring minors. They engage in capacity building of their companies. And they're also directly engaged in monitoring to make sure that there are no children actually in the fields and in the industry. In Vietnam, the Employers Federation is doing a benchmarking of the member federations against the code of conduct which they have developed, and the requirements on child labor, of course, part of this code of conduct. And also very interesting, they developed a youth forum where they bring in employers and youth. So employers better understand what are the needs of youth, what are the expectations, so to really facilitate the dialogue between both. In Morocco, the Employers Federation developed a website dedicated on child labor where you have tools, guidance, the law, partners, and so on and so forth. Very easy access to everyone. And they also developed a label on responsible business conduct where companies which are compliant with the requirements of this label can show that to the outside world. In Mexico, the Employers Federation, together with the ILO, the IOE, government, NGOs, trade unions, developing at the moment a project to get children from the recycling sector. You have many children in Mexico working in the recycling sector on dump sites, collecting bottles to bottles, paper to paper. And the aim of this project is very concretely to get the children from the dump sites. And finally, Kenya, which is not a Pathfinder country, but nevertheless, I think it's very interesting, the example. They have a program which called Adapt the School, And basically, the federation is bringing schools together with companies, and the companies then support the schools financially. They support the schools also with advice. They offer internships opportunities for these children of these schools. So it's basically a matchmaking. You find all these examples on the IOE website, many more also, where we have very good videos from these different projects, so it might inspire you. Last word, for us as Employers Federation, it's key that this is the topic after the year 2021. At the moment, everyone speaks about it because it's the International Year of Child Labor, and it is also, of course, the global estimates came out, everyone is shocked about the increase, so it's a big topic at the moment. But we need to make sure going ahead that it keeps to be a big topic, that we keep the agenda on the eradication of child labor. And the Alliance 8.7 is key for that, and I really would like to applaud you, Chair, for your effort in leading this effort, and I would like also to thank the Secretariat in the ILO, Thomas Wissing and others for all the work they are doing. And I also would like to promote the child labor platform of the ILO, which brings together employers, trade unions, Jerome Weinert from the ITUC, who is co-chairs, I think, also here, and which brings all together companies and NGOs. And this, of course, Roy Gans came out of the Dutch Child Labor Conference in the Netherlands, right? There it started, and then it was taken over by the ILO. It's a great tool for collective action. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. You show exactly the power of partnership in very specific projects. And also, you have mentioned the fact that not only eradicating child labor should be a full-time job, but also a long-term endeavor. And it should not just be, you know, under the light of the day, the international year 2021 or the International Day, which is June the 12th, but all over the year. And for the coming years, we have a lot to do, and we really count on employers' organizations and workers' organizations to help us with that. With these words, I would like to give the floor to Measho Berihu, please.
Thank you, moderator. Thank you, moderator. Dear Excellencies of participants of the session, first of all, I would like to thank for giving me this opportunity to share my country's trade union few achievements and challenges. Unfortunately, while we are having this conversation, I think there is a little celebrity when we have collectively allowed forced and child labor to persist and even rise in recent years. The impact of COVID-19 and indeed rising conflict going on my own country are likely to worsen the trend if we didn't act decisively. Forced labor and child labor are extremely forms of workers' abuse and cannot be addressed in isolation from other workers' rights. As workers' representative, I believe that when workers are formally employed with decent job, adequate social protection, and labor rights are reinforced by effective labor inspection, forced and child labor stands no chance. Therefore, governments have the obligation to install a regulatory framework, protect workers' rights, and mandates from companies throughout their supply chain. Saying this, when I going to my country example, according to 2015 National Children Labor Survey, child labor is particularly prevailing in Ethiopia with 42.7% of children's age from 5 to 17 years engaged in worst child labor. More than 87.5 children are working in hazardous work, especially in the agriculture sector. Out of this, 92% are working non-paid labor in their family agriculture business. Accordingly, by this opportunity, as trade union, we recommend for our government and countries similar to my country, they need to take measurements to ensure children under 14 years age, particularly children working on their own account in the informal economy, are protected against child labor, and take measures to strengthen capacity and expand to reach labor inspectors. Secondly, the government should introduce a strong follow-up mechanism for effective implementation of compulsory education up to grade 8. Finally, from the government side, we recommend to hold frequent tripartite consultation on those matters. When I go directly to mention some of the few roles of trade union concerning my trade union at national level, we suggest that trade union should collaborate with government, employers, and other pertinent stakeholders to improve workers' protection mechanism and end the child labor. Second, advocate the need for combating modern slavery. Third, working closely to create awareness programs on combating modern slavery for victims, families, communities, lawmakers and implementers, and also or as well as stakeholders. Finally, promotion of ratification of international labor standard related to child labor and migration, also another point to be responsible of trade union. To mention some practical example, currently SETU is running 3 years project on combating modern slavery, which is implemented throughout my country with financial assistance of Law Norway, that means Confederation of Norway Trade Unions, and from NORAD program. I thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much for your very insightful communication. I just want to put a stress on tripartite consultation at national level, on which you put a right, and also on the ratification of international labor standards. Workers and employers organizations are active members of the Global Coordination Group of Alliance 8.7, and I wish once again to commend their commitment. I would like now to warmly welcome 2 youth advocates that will share with us powerful stories of change. Ms. Ebot Whitney Tram, she's a Fair Share campaign youth activist and child protection officer at Survivors Network from Cameroon, and also Ms. Molly Marin Namirembe, youth advocate and SCREAM program trainer from Uganda. Waiting to have you on the screen, both of you.
Hello.
Molly is with us.
Evening from Cameroon. This is Whitney.
Whitney, we cannot see you.
Sorry.
Can you put your video on? Yes, now we will have you on the large screen, hopefully. Yes, great.
Okay.
Thank you very much to both of you for being with us today. As I said in my opening intervention, the Alliance is a multi-stakeholder partnership, and the role of civil society organizations at the global level and on the ground is crucial. It gives the Alliance the strength and reminds us that of the reality of the situation of so many people throughout the world. Whitney, please tell us about your story and how you are mobilizing action in the framework of the Fair Share for Children campaign. What is it important and why? Have we lost you, Whitney? Yeah, yeah.
I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you much. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Cameroon. I am Ebot Whitney-Ta, a survivor of child sexual abuse. I was 5 years old when I was constantly abused repeatedly for months. I'm sorry for the British slide. But just like me, there are hundreds of millions of children who suffer from abuse, exploitation, and violence. Children who are at risk of being trafficked and forced into child labor, and more children at the intersection of all these injustices. I am a child protection officer at Survivors Network Cameroon. This is a female-led organization which advocates against human trafficking and modern-day slavery in all its forms. So far, we have been able to help and rescue more than 200 children from human trafficking and forced labor. The ongoing crisis in the English-speaking regions of Cameroon has greatly increased the vulnerability of children at risk. Further, in 2020, the world was warned about the devastating impact COVID will have on the rate of progress across all areas of children's rights, including child labor, particularly for the world's poorest children. These predictions are proving to be true. The latest ILO and UNICEF data shows that since the start of the SDGs in 2016, 8 million and more children have been forced into child labor. But this increase was even before the pandemic began. An ILO prediction suggests almost 170 million children will be forced to work by the end of 2022. If this proves to be true, it would mean the rate of entry into child labor is currently doubling. Now, what greater evidence do we need to show efforts to eliminate child labor are failing? In regards to mobilizing in line with the Fair Share campaign and its importance, Survivors Network joined the global efforts of the Fair Share campaign to lead the efforts in Cameroon, with the looming target of eliminating child labor in all its forms by 2025. The campaign is shining a global spotlight on child labor and modern slavery. It aims to secure a fair share of resources, laws, and social protection for the most marginalized children and their communities. The Fair Share campaign is demanding these things because the only way to end child labor is to end the root causes of child labor. The children enduring these injustices are doing so because they and their families have been discriminated against for generations. They have an unfair share of global wealth, an unfair share of public services like education, healthcare, sanitation, and energy. And they have little or no access to social protection like child benefits or income protection. Wealthy governments must end the discrimination in how decisions with efforts in poorer countries are made. We need to address how local governments are being distributed resources. Therefore, we call on governments to address global wealth with a fairer taxation policies to ensure that these resources are allocated and exploited by the people most in need. All of our governments must prioritize quality public services for the people most in need. Rural areas are still in need of schools, easy access to clean water, and basic healthcare infrastructure. It is not a coincidence that the majority of child labor occurs in the fields. No family should be so poor that are forced to send their children to work. And we know that cash transfer and other forms of social protection are effective in ending child labor. If we want to end child labor for good, governments must accelerate efforts across all of these areas. Finally, I join all the youth-led and civil society organizations under the banner of the Fair Share to End Child Labor campaign to call on all the leaders to enact policies, laws, and social protection structures that will be implemented by the state governments to achieve the 2025 deadline to end child trafficking, child labor in all its forms. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your story and for the important work you're doing for the rights of children. Molly, turning to you, great to have you today with us. Could you tell us your story as a child in child labor and what was the turning point in your life that helped you get to where you are today?
Thank you so much to the organizers of this event for organizing such a wonderful webinar and for inviting me to be a part of it. My father died when I was less than 2 years old, and my paternal family wanted to take custody of me. So my mother had to take me away so that I can live with her. So growing up, it was always me, my mother, and my sister. Unfortunately, at the age of 11, on the 1st of March 2004, my mother passed on. And because we had not interacted with many of our family members, it was just us with our mom, we ended up living alone and taking care of ourselves. We lived near a tea plantation and we knew how to pick tea. So when our mother died, we had no option but to get into the job. So we started working. I personally worked for the first 1 year part-time, early in the morning before I went to school and in the evening after school. But after completing primary 7, I needed to join a new grade of education and we needed more money for me to do that. So I dropped out of school completely, thinking that maybe I would be able to raise more money because we were also paid per basket picked. So I thought I would be able to pick more baskets and therefore get more money. But this also didn't help much because the money we collected always ended up maybe meeting our daily costs and not able to save money for me to go and join education. At this time, it was the worst part of my life so far because we had to wake up very early in the morning. The latest was always 6 a.m. Walk through the morning dew, bear insect bites, walk on an empty stomach, and also sometimes, actually all the time, walk around with a basket around my neck because we would pick tea and then put it in the basket. So it was heavy work for me. But the greatest pain was seeing other children walk to school early in the morning as I walked to the farm. I really felt bad. That was my worst experience. And it made me feel bad, not because I was jealous of my friends, but because I watched my dream of going to school fade away slowly and slowly. I never gave up on education, so I would borrow my friends' books and copy notes every evening after work so that I kept up to speed. Until one day when I realized it was enough for me to throw pity parties and cry on my bed and cry in the arms of my sister, and I decided to look for help. I began by looking for friends of my parents who led me to my maternal family first, where I didn't really get so much help because they were also a poor family. But later on, I linked up with my paternal family and one of my uncles took me under his wings. And that's how I was able to go back to school. At that time, all that I knew was school was the best place for me to be and not the farm. And all that I had with me was hope that something would finally work out, and I never gave up. And here I am today working with Ecological Christian Organization, an NGO in Uganda. We use the SCREAM methodology. SCREAM is supporting children's rights through education, art, and media, which is a methodology of the ILO. We use it to support children to remain resilient. For me, I do this because I know that's what helped me, and I believe it can help so many other children. So we help them to remain resilient amidst all the challenges. We help them to look out for one another, especially during these times of the pandemic where schools are closed, families are struggling. We still continue to encourage children to look out for one another and offer any support they can be able to offer. We encourage them to embrace education. Even now that they're out of school for a long time, they need to remain positive about education and wait for the schools to open and still go back. We also encourage them to look out for help. Help lies within our families, within our communities, within organizations, and within governments. So we encourage them to be able to look out for that help. But we also use the SCREAM methodology to offer bridge sessions for victims of child labor and child trafficking, because we know it's not easy that when you pick them out of child labor, then they are ready for school. So we offer bridge sessions for them to be able to understand what are they going in for. Are they ready to change? What career path do they want to take? They have been through exploitation. Some of them break down and want to cry. They simply want someone to share their story with. They simply want someone to tell them that something else is going to work out amidst whatever they went through. So we do that, but we also go ahead to use the SCREAM methodology to train teachers to create a conducive environment at school for these children, to be able to receive and welcome victims of child labor. Some of them have dealt with more money than actually the teachers have. Some of them have gone through a lot of abuse and they need psychosocial support at school. So we support the teachers through this methodology to ensure that they are able to listen, to handle cases, and also offer some counseling. We do all this in addition to livelihood programs that are aimed at enhancing livelihood of households, so that children can be able to stay in their families, can be able to be taken care of by their families, because family is the best place for all children. So we have so far worked with 13 children clubs, and we are still going. With the pandemic, we hope to accelerate our efforts and maybe widen up, scale up, though sometimes we are challenged by resources. But we are not giving up. We are working with whatever we have. We encourage others to also use the resources within their communities to go on. And one thing I can say, that amidst the pandemic, we do not need to give up as actors. We need to ensure that every child has their first 18 years child labor free. And I personally pledge to continue contributing to this, because I know what child labor feels like, and I don't wish it for anyone else in this world. Ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow is too far. Today is already late. We must act now to end child labor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly, for sharing your experience with us, and congratulations to the work you are leading in your organization. Molly, based on your experience and being from a Pathfinder country yourself, what would you like to ask to the 3 Pathfinder country leaders that are here with us today? What is one question you may ask, and a very short answer from them?
Okay. First of all, I believe education is greatly part of the solution to ending child labor. So I would like to ask, what are your countries doing differently to ensure inclusive and quality education as a solution to child labor in the framework of the COVID-19 pandemic and its challenges? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Minister Povedano, are you still with us?
Aquí estoy. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, very good. We'll wait. You should be on the screen so that you can answer to Molly. Is your video on?
I should start?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Molly, for that question. And I'm very sorry to hear about your story, but excited at the same time, because I think when you come from a place like where you're coming from, you're motivated, and then you're speaking from a point of conviction, and when you speak, you have absolute legitimacy to speak on the things that you're going to speak about. When you advocate for children to go to school, you know exactly what not going to school is going to do for their future. And so I think just to share a little bit about what we're doing in Malawi, because what COVID-19 has done is to expose the disparities and inequalities that are there in the education sector, but not only in the education sector, but also in several other sectors like the health sector, for example. And then while now private school kids whose parents can afford a phone or a smartphone or a tablet and all of that, and they're doing online learning, we have kids in estates, kids in the rural areas that are unable, one, to even access the network, and to even think of having a smartphone is out of this world. But what we're trying to do now is to ensure that we are bridging that gap that exists in secondary schools. And what we have done is to ensure that we're empowering the education sector on issues of prevention specifically, so that our teachers are safe from COVID-19, and that they are able also to give it to children. I think the thing that we have had, one of the advantages that we have had as a nation, is that the COVID-19 hasn't really affected young people in Malawi, even those that are under the age of 20 or 18. So we are very lucky. We have been very, very lucky in that regard. So our schools are still open as it is now. And so what we are doing is to ensure that teachers in all our rural and urban centers are still teaching, and they have the necessary equipment to do so, especially the PPEs, to ensure that they are still in classrooms, they are vaccinated, and that they have every necessary equipment that they have. What we also have done is to ensure that we are decongesting the classroom, and we have now decongested the classrooms. We have ensured that we have procured tents to ensure that we are decongesting children. But at the same time, we have also recruited a lot of auxiliary teachers at the moment to ensure that once we have decongested, there's ongoing learning, and that other people are not having to wait. Other children are not having to wait for here to come and teach them. So we have recruited auxiliary teachers that are teaching at the moment. So I think in terms of education, what we have done is to ensure that the gap that already exists shouldn't be extended, but that every child that is in primary or secondary school is able to still get their education, so that they are on regarding the school calendar. That's what we have done as a nation at the moment.
Thank you. Minister Povedano.
Thank you. Probablemente, Molly, el desafío más grande que tenemos en Costa Rica en relación con cómo en el contexto actual garantizar la continuidad de la educación de nuestros niños y niñas ha sido la falta de conectividad y la falta de herramientas como computadoras o tablets o teléfonos para garantizar que aún en confinamiento, aún cuando no es posible aún ir a clases de manera presencial, los niños y las niñas y los adolescentes puedan seguir conectados. El desafío más grande es un desafío de conectividad y de equipamiento. Repito, computadoras, tablets o alguna forma de que los niños y las niñas permanezcan conectados. Eso es un desafío que ha sido muy complejo porque no lo podemos resolver en el corto tiempo. Lo que quedó evidente es que lo que llamamos la brecha digital está dejando atrás a una gran cantidad de personas y estudiantes en nuestro país. El segundo desafío muy importante en materia de educación es que el cuerpo docente no estaba preparado para impartir clases de manera digital. Entonces, hacerlo de manera digital, virtual, ha sido, no ha permitido a los docentes trabajar, transmitir los conocimientos, ni organizar dinámicas de clase que le permitan a los niños y a las niñas desarrollar esos conocimientos. Y eso es un desafío para el cual todavía no tenemos una respuesta. En esta semana ya iniciamos clases presenciales combinado, una parte de los estudiantes van de manera presencial y en otros momentos van de manera virtual y se está buscando hacer una combinación de procesos de aprendizaje presencial y virtual. Molly, pero me da mucha pena decirle que todavía, aparte de todos los esfuerzos que hemos hecho como país para adecuar los procesos de aprendizaje a un ambiente virtual, lo que sin embargo estamos encontrando es, además de lo que mencioné, ¿verdad?, problemas de conectividad, no hay equipamiento, pero además el tercer elemento también muy importante es que para que los niños y las niñas participen de procesos virtuales se requiere apoyo en los hogares. Y en Costa Rica hay hogares con un bajo ambiente de aprendizaje y de condiciones de aprendizaje, porque incluso los padres y las madres no necesariamente tienen el nivel educativo para acompañar a sus niños y niñas en ese proceso de aprendizaje. Y esos tres factores están siendo una combinación muy compleja de atender. Por eso, y lo mencionaba yo al principio, en cada centro educativo se creó esto que se llama un comité de permanencia. Es un task force que está dedicado a identificar los casos de los niños y las niñas que están en riesgo de salir del sistema educativo o niños y niñas que por estas tres condiciones que explico están en riesgo de retirarse del todo del sistema educativo. Y entonces este grupo de personas de los centros educativos se acercan al hogar y buscan ofrecer a los hogares las condiciones que se requieran para que estas personas, estos niños y niñas no salgan del sistema educativo, porque si salen del sistema educativo va a ser muy difícil recuperarlos.
Thank you very much, Minister. And now the floor is yours, Raul.
Thank you, Anousheh. First of all, I really want to thank Molly and Whitney for sharing their impressive and courageous stories with us. And they make abundantly clear that there is a real urgency to do something about all the terrible things in this field that are still going on currently in the world. And regarding the question Molly asked, my government truly believes that access to quality education is essential in the fight against child labor. My government on a yearly basis spends about 5.5 billion euros on development cooperation. And one of the priorities in the development cooperation is, of course, education of young people. We need to give young people the opportunity to go to school, to have free schooling, because after all, if they don't receive free schooling, it is very easy for them to be drawn into labor, which they don't want to do. And children need an education to build a brighter future for themselves, to get a quality job, and thereby break the vicious cycle of poverty leading to child labor. So indeed, it is a key issue to solve the issue of child labor. And I think that Western donors have a very strong responsibility to devote part of their development cooperation efforts to promoting education for young people in those countries that at the moment do not have the capacity to finance this all themselves. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Raoul. May I have the screen again? Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for this very productive and rich discussion. It is very heartening to hear about the ways governments, workers, employers, and youth advocates are keeping the focus on SDG target 8.7. Before passing to our final speaker for the closing remarks, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to apply to the SDG 8.7 Innovation Challenge. We welcome innovate ideas from all over the world to support Pathfinder countries in the implementation of their roadmaps towards SDG 8.7. You can find more information on the Alliance 8.7 website and on the International Year website also. To finalize, I'd like to invite our last speaker, Ms. Lachezara Stoeva, permanent representative of Bulgaria to the UN and co-chair of the group of Friends of Children and the SDGs, for her closing remarks. Your Excellency, thank you for being with us today. Can we have you on the screen? Great. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ms. Carver. First of all, allow me to highlight how happy Bulgaria is to be co-sponsoring that event because this is a topic of great importance. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants for the productive discussion. Today's event clearly indicates the commitment of governments, international organizations, NGOs, and other key stakeholders to continue their efforts aimed at safeguarding the rights of the child and eliminating and preventing child labor, as set in SDG 8.7. As we heard from the stories of Molly and Whitney, which are very sad but inspiring at the same time, and I would like to congratulate them both for their courage and for their persistence to get where they are. And Molly mentioned that this has been the worst part of her life so far. Molly, I hope that this is the worst part of your life ever and that bright future awaits you and only happiness, so I wish you that. And with that, I just wanted to say that obviously today's discussion highlights the need to address this extremely important topic and that we need to unite efforts, because the data we have seen in the last year, especially with the pandemic, has been quite worrying. We have seen a rise of child labor, but however, it also shows that if we act as together and united, we can improve the situation. And this is in line, this discussion today highlights the topics that were included in the joint statement that we presented, Bulgaria presented on behalf of the members of the groups of Friends of Children and SDGs and group of Friends of Decent Work during the high-level political forum. So we need to act on our words. Action is needed. We have the policies, obviously, we have the words, we have the actions outlined, but from here we need to work on implementation. I just wanted to give a few examples of what Bulgaria is doing in the area of prevention and elimination of child labor. Education was mentioned on a number of occasions throughout today's discussion, and our constitution provides for compulsory schooling up to the age of 16 and free of charge primary and secondary education. Both of those are extremely important because if we have compulsory education, this is a critical prerequisite for children to be involved in the learning process rather than work. And if we can provide for free education, on the other hand, this reduces the risk of involving children in work in order to fund their studies. And this was highlighted earlier by Raoul Gans. In the field of family support, we have a number of actions that were undertaken to prevent child labor, including during and tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. Through measures that are tackling inequalities and social exclusion, Bulgaria seeks to help parents and families to access various types of family allowances, grants under the Family Allowances for Children Act, and form of financial support that address the negative impact of the pandemic. We are also proud to be a pilot country implementing the third phase of the EU Child Guarantee project that supports capacity building, system strengthening, and the integration of policies, programs, and services provision to ensure that children and families in need have access to essential services. And I'll give you just a couple of examples. Those services include home visiting services for children aged 0 to 3 and their families with special focus on families in precarious situations, inclusive preschool education services for children with disabilities and learning difficulties, outreach to child and family-centered preventive measures and services to children in precarious family situations with a focus on vulnerable Roma children in their families. And to conclude, there are two messages that we need to take out. First of all, the importance of the inclusion of youth and children in the decision-making process for the sustainable recovery from the pandemic. Children are recognized as critical agents of change by the Agenda 2030 and as key stakeholders of the future. This means meaningful participation at all levels is very essential. And I cannot highlight enough the importance of education. Education is indispensable because many children may not return to school after the pandemic as their education was disrupted and they have transitioned to child labor. While we explore the options to reopen schools, we need to bridge the digital divide and ensure that every child has digital connectivity and safe access to the internet while protecting them from cyberbullying and from online sexual exploitation. This will not only provide an opportunity for e-learning, but will also contribute to their digital skills. And with that, I am done with my concluding remarks. Again, thank you very much for an extremely rich discussion. I hope that this discussion will feed into the actions that we all need to take, and that in a couple of years we can mark a drastic reduction of child labor, not full of elimination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thanks to all our speakers, and thank you also to our international audience for joining us today. Hopefully, we go off in the spirit of collective action and renewed determination to end child labor by 2025 and forced labor, human trafficking and modern slavery by 2030. Let us act together now. This is the key message I would like to convey to you. And thank you very much again for this very, very interesting and productive webinar. See you next year, and hopefully with better news about the eradication of child labor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.